Well, GBNews reporter Amelia Harper joins us now to explain the ongoing events in Mordil. She's outside the Afghanistan embassy. Amelia, according to the Pentagon, 10,000 people still waiting to be evacuated. Time is running out.
Time is running out, and that terror threat is increasingly going up, according to international officials. The US and Australia have this morning also issued the same advice to stay away from Kabul airport. It seems that the evacuation effort is now focusing on getting the people who are there out, because Defence Secretary Ben Wallace has urged people who aren't there to try now and go to land borders instead as a route out. Of course, tens of thousands of people are still, every day we are seeing this, trying to flee Kabul airport. Only yesterday, Tory MP Tom Tugendhat, he's also a military veteran, tweeted to say his friend's son was caught in a crush and that he is now breathing again. So clearly we're seeing scenes of people standing in sewage canals trying desperately to get out. And of course, as you said, that clock is ticking. I've been speaking to people who are there who were concerned about getting out. One of them is a Chevening scholar. Now, they obviously are the biggest and best and brightest in Afghanistan who've been granted a scholarship to come and study in the UK. He had studied here in about 2014-15. He's been in contact with the Home Office and the Foreign Office to try to get out. He hasn't actually received any further communication from them. And of course, that deadline is the 31st. That's next Tuesday. But it's worth noting, actually, that UK and US forces, in order to get themselves out by that deadline, will probably need to wrap things up around 24 to 48 hours before that deadline as well. I was speaking to him yesterday afternoon, and of course, I can't go into his role just to protect his identity, but he is at a direct threat from the Taliban. And of course, Chevening scholars are sometimes said by the Taliban as looked at as spies. So he is at direct risk. He told me he's been locked inside his home for a week now. In a quote, he told me his heart bleeds. Now, let's look at the evacuation effort. As you said, over 82,000 people have left Afghanistan since Kabul fell to the Taliban on the 14th. Last night, Number 10 said that 10,000 people had been evacuated as part of Operation Pitting. The Pentagon says 10,000 more people are still waiting to get out. Of course, international forces are rushing to meet this deadline. Joe Biden, US president, says he won't budge on the withdrawal, and this is a red line for the Taliban. If they don't meet that deadline, it will, in a quote, provoke a reaction. Now, Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab says he is unclear how many people will be left behind by the end of the month. Of course, the RAF still needs to airlift nearly 2,000 Afghan interpreters and staff who worked for Britain. But this leads me on to the terror threat. US President Joe Biden alluded to that increasing terror threat. Of course, that alert has been issued by the Foreign Office this morning. It's worth noting that it's not always necessarily been about the Taliban at the centre of the terror threat, but it's the groups that they allow to grow under their rule. The Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, has said Britain wants to exercise the maximum moderating influence it can to prevent the Taliban from turning Afghanistan into a breeding ground for terror. But let's look quickly at the main threats from terror groups in Afghanistan. There are three. Firstly, you've got the Haqqani network, Al-Qaeda, and the biggest threat to the West, which is ISIS-K. Now, the Haqqani network are responsible for a number of attacks in Afghanistan since 2001, and one of their leaders is currently part of the Taliban leadership. Al-Qaeda, of course, their influence has slightly waned over recent years, but that, of course, is a risk that could grow now that the Taliban are back in power. They, of course, Taliban sheltered Osama bin Laden during 1996 to 2001. But the largest threat is ISIS-K. Now, this was mentioned by Joe Biden. Now, what this is an IS affiliate group, the Islamic State in the Khorasan province, which is a historical region covering parts of Afghanistan and Pakistan. They are sworn enemies, actually, of the Taliban. They think the Taliban's approach to Sharia law is too soft. They are much more hard-line than the Taliban. They, of course, have claimed deadly attacks across many parts of Afghanistan, killing many people. This is interesting, though. Overnight, a terrorism expert has looked at some data relating to IS and the terror threat there. He has raised concerns about the terror threat. This is from Charlie White. He's a terrorism expert at the International Centre for the Study of Radicalisation at KCL. He says they're behaving very strangely. What he says, in June 2021, it reported 19 times as many attacks as it did in June 2020. But what he is saying, is looking at data, is that IS groups have been totally inactive for 11 days since Kabul fell. He says this is not in response to any known counter-ISIS-K operations. And he says the most likely reason, is that they are deliberately laying low.